Today we'll be debating about the cry of rebellion. Was it Balintawak or Pugadlawin? To start first, we head on next to the Pugadlawin side.
Good day, everyone. We believe the cry of rebellion took place in Pugadlawin on August 23, 1896. This is where the Catineros, led by Andres Bonifacio, tore their cedulas as a symbol of defiance against Spain. Our position is supported by the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, also has primary witnesses and historians that support our claim. While Balintawak is often mentioned, it was more of a general area or meeting place, not the actual site of the crime. What truly mattered was where the symbolic act of rebellion happened, which we believe is at.
So historical evidence favors that the first cry took place in Pugadlawin on August 23, 1896, and not in Balintawak. This conclusion is supported by three main points. Eyewitness accounts by Katipuneros, especially Dr. Pio Valenzuela, historical synthesis by Teodoro Agoncillo, and official recognition by the Philippine government. The geography and movement of Katipuneros in August 1896. To start, Dr. Pio Valenzuela, Bonifacio's physician and emissary, recalled that the assembly occurred at the house and yard of Juan Ramos in Pubilawin on August 23, 1896. Here, the Katipuneros stored their cedulas and shouted patriotic slogans signaling the start of the revolution. Teodoro Agoncillo's book, The Revolt of the Masses, in 1956, built on Valenzuela's account, arguing that the cry happened in Pugadlawin. President Diosdado Macapagal then issued Proclamation Number 149 in 1963, moving the official commemoration from Balintawak to Pugadlawin on August 23. For the geography, Balintawak at the time was a large rural area. Pugadlawin was a smaller city within Caloocan, closer to allies like Melchor Aquino and Juan Ramos. Because of Spanish surveillance after August 19, 1896, the Katipuneros met at more secure spots like Pugadlawin. Some Katipuneros such as Santiago Alvarez named nearby areas like Bahay Toro, Pasong Tamo, and Kangkong. These variations show that the group's mobility from 23 to 26 August 1896. While Balintawak appeared on Spanish maps and later commemorations, Pugadlawin faded from official records explaining why memories differed.
So, in terms of the account given by Pio Valenzuela, his later memoirs, he revised his statement saying the cry happened in Pugadlawin on August 23, 1896, at the house of Juan Ramos, which is the son of Melchor Aquino. And in terms of Santiago Alvarez, the Katipunan commander, though he is not an eyewitness, he claimed that the cry happened exactly on August 23, 1896, at near Pugadlawin. Now, in terms of other eyewitnesses, such as Gregoria de Jesus, which is the wife of Bonifacio, he recalled that the cry happened near Caloocan on August 25, suggesting that it is closer to Pugadlawin. And eyewitness credibility of Valenzuela's later account was his later memoir reflected that his attempt to be more accurate after the reflection. So, families of Pugadlawin, like Melchor Aquino's descendants, preserve the story of the cry occurring within Pugadlawin. Now, since the 1960s, historians and the Philippine government officially shifted the Balintawak to Pugadlawin on August 23, which is now taught in school. So, to summarize this, all the eyewitnesses that we have compiled or and researched have all pointed to the fact that it happened within Pugadlawin on August 23, 1896.
So, although Guillermo Masangkay pointed to Balintawak, his account conflicted with multiple witnesses. The National Historical Institute reinforced Pugadlawin's credibility by officially declaring its site in 1986, a decision reaffirmed in 2001.
The statement of Pio Valenzuela was also supported by his fellow Katipuneros, Bricio Pantas, Serpano Paeshoco, and Vicente Samson. And then, according also to Teodoro Agoncillo, he also argued that the term Balintawak referred to a larger geographic area, while Pugadlawin was just a specific place within it.
And I think that concludes for the Pugadlawin side.
Thank you for that. Good day to all. We will be representing the side that is in defense of Balintawak being the true cry of rebellion. So the debate continues. Where did the cry of rebellion occur? Some argue that it was in Balintawak, where the Katipunan numbers finally decided to rise, and early revolutionary veterans also confirmed this. However, in 1908 and 1962, the Filipinos officially commemorated the cry of Balintawak on August 26, but was later changed to by President Macapagal in 1963 to Pugadlawin on August 23, which brings us to the objective of this debate, which is to preserve the integrity of our history by making sure that it accurately depicts the true story of our ancestors. So our team stands firmly on the side of Balintawak being the true cry of rebellion, presenting these three main arguments, which is the early testimonies and eyewitness accounts, absence of credible records of Pugadlawin, and finally, veterans, commemorations, and historical consistency. So I will now be giving the floor to the first presenter of our first argument.
So for our first argument, we have the primary sources or the early testimonies and eyewitness accounts. For the eyewitness accounts, we have all having close relations or interactions to Andres Bonifacio, who is the founder of the Katipunan. So first we have Dr. Pio Valenzuela, who is a very close associate with Andres Bonifacio and an eyewitness to the event. He stated that the cry is happened on August 26, 1896, and in his given statement, which is the first version, he stated that in that moment that his memories were still vivid. So next is we have Gregoria de Jesus, who is the wife of Andres Bonifacio and known as the Lakambini of the Katipunan. And in her account, she stated that the first cry happened on August 25, 1896, near Caloocan, and mentioning Pasong Tamo, which is an area within Balintawak. And then next for the third one is General Guillermo Masangkay, who is the general advisor and the childhood friend of Andres Bonifacio and one of the first members of the Katipunan. And he provided detailed accounts that the cry happened on also in August 26, 1896. His eyewitness account specifies that the meeting took place at the house of Apolonio Samson in Balintawak, also being a witness hearing the first shots fired that indicates the start of the rebellion. Then last and the most important account is Captain Olegario Diaz, a commander or lieutenant of the Guardia Civil, veterana of Manila. He reported that the cry happened on August 25, 1896, and an account from a Spanish source which this provides external evidence of the location and dates compared with other eyewitness accounts, which supports Dr. Peyo and General Guillermo accounts, comparing it as well to how close the dates or similar dates to Gregoria's account. So the difference between the other accounts and Olegario Diaz is that his recorded statement is fixed. So his records had no political incentive, which is to change the narrative or dates of his statements to suit the national or political commemoration. So his reports lacks nationalistic biases, and which creates his statement is non-biased on his account, basically. So for the second argument is
For our second argument, a writer who researched the rebellion in the 1920s could not find any mention of Pugadlawin in records or census data from 1903 to 1918. Additionally, detailed Spanish and American maps show Balintawak but don't show any signs of Pugadlawin.
Accounts from the revolutionaries who actually fought with Andres Bonifacio is one of the important truths that the cry of the rebellion took place in Balintawak. When the event was first commemorated in 1908, Katipunan veterans gathered in Balintawak, showing their memory of the site based on direct experience, not later retellings. Even Gregoria de Jesus, the wife of Bonifacio, the Lakambini of the Katipunan, confirmed that the cry happened on August 25, 1896, at Pasong Tamo near Caloocan, part of Balintawak.
So for the questions we'd like to ask to the Pugadlawin side, first is the Pugadlawin uses Valenzuela's accounts as their strongest piece of evidence. However, how do you explain the fact that he gave four different versions of the cry in 1896, 1911, 1928, and 1948? Doesn't this make him your weakest foundation?
I'll be volunteering to answer that question. So the reason why he has different versions of the cry, let us factor that during the time it was in the under Philippines was under this Spanish rule at the time, and the Katipuneros was hiding. In August 19, they started to find like they were having their suspicions. So I think that was the reason why Pio Valenzuela said that it occurred in Balintawak but not in Pugadlawin.
Okay, moving on to the next question is the Pugadlawin side mentioned that Pugadlawin may not have appeared on maps because they didn't always have records of small studios. However, if this was such an important historical place and the birthplace of the revolution, why is there no single contemporary record that mentions Pugadlawin in 1896? And why should we believe in a place that only appears decades later?
I'll volunteer to answer that question. This is because the name Pugadlawin might just be a name only the locals know, or it might be a code word only the Katipunan members know. So it's kind of like a secret code word only used within the Katipunan.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Moving on to the last question. It involves political motivations for reframing of history. In Agonchola's book, which the opposition mentions, it was criticized for being inaccurate in favor of dramatizing events, and it conveniently aligns with Macapagal's nationalistic ideology. Which begs the question, was the shift of Pugadlawin the result of new, stronger historical evidence, or was it the result of popularized media and political convenience?
So I would like to volunteer as well to answer this. So in terms of whether or not Pugadlawin was for the sake the location was given based on political convenience in your question, we need to remember as well that it wasn't baseless. That the recognition that was given by President Macapagal, it wasn't done because they simply wanted to switch or they were just biased for the date, but rather it was based on the historical testimonies from Valenzuela, Guillermo, Magsay, and the other testimonies that were mentioned earlier when we explained our side, and that highlighted that the said tearing was indeed in Pugadlawan.
Now we move on to the Q&A portion of Group Balintawak. For the first question, how can the accounts of other Filipino revolutionaries or Spanish officials be considered more credible than Dr. Pio Valenzuela's account, despite fellow Katipuneros such as Briquio Pantas, Cipriano Pachenko, and Vicente Samson supporting Pio Valenzuela's account?
To answer your question, considering that Pio Valenzuela's account changes 4 times, it can be considered more unreliable compared to Masangkai's account, which stayed consistent over the years. And as for the people who supported Pio Valenzuela's account, they only showed their support after Pio Valenzuela's account, and they added no more to the narrative other than supporting it for the purpose of supporting it.
Okay, thank you for that. So moving on to our next question. If Balintawak was really the site, why does the NHCP and most history books now officially recognize Pugadlawin as the location?
That's a good question. The NHCP and most history books recognize Pugadlawin because later testimonies, especially by Pio Valenzuela, placed the cry there and highlighted that the symbolic act of tearing the cedulas. In 1963, the government officially adopted this version for the commemoration, so textbooks markers followed, even though earlier sources and veterans remembered Balintawak.
To resume where we left off, I would like to ask Group Balintawak our last question. Now, isn't it possible that Balintawak was just a broader term for the whole area, and the specific site was in Pugadlawin? Why focus on Balintawak when the symbolic tearing of cedulas, the key moment of the rebellion, is consistently tied to Pugadlawin, in where the tearing of cedulas, the cry of rebellion happened at the house of Juan Ramos, which is located within Pugadlawin?
So I'll volunteer for that question. So it is possible, but sure, when mentioning Balintawak, it wasn't just an area mentioned in the reports or memoirs of the accounts, but it also wait, identify where events happened. So the only reason why specifically Pugadlawin, because the early statements formed from the accounts whom witnessed it. And the reason to focus on Balintawak is because of the written statements from Spanish reports and first statements created, which are more viable.
Okay, thank you for your questions. And as for the conclusion of from Group Pugadlawin, as we've seen, while there are several accounts of the cry of 1896, the evidence from Pio Valenzuela's testimony, Teodoro Agoncillo's research, and the Philippine government's own recognition points to Pugadlawin as the true site of the first open act of revolt. These differing perspectives remind us that history is not static, but built from eyewitness memories, geography, and official records. By studying all sides critically, we gain a clearer and more balanced understanding of our nation's struggle for freedom. Thank you.
To conclude our side, the Balintawak side firmly stands in its stance as the cry of rebellion being in Balintawak. Based on the evidence of consistent historical records, reliable primary sources, the collective testimony of key revolutionary figures, and the absence of documentation for Pugadlawin, offer a compelling argument that supports Balintawak as the true birthplace of the revolution. Thank you.